Where is the final approach fix for ILS 23 at Greensboro? So if you have your ForeFlight with you, if you want to pull that up and follow along with me, I'm going to primarily focus on the Jeppesen charts, but I will put up some of the government charts too, because remember, these are the interview questions that you're going to get. This is an interview question, by the way, at some of the airlines. And I'm going to focus on that. We're going to do like whole sessions just on some of these questions because, like I said, I think you guys really like them. So looks good, Vic? Okay, so if you pull up it's the 11-3 page, I'm going to zoom in, by the way, so you may not be able to see everything right now, but I'm going to zoom in. And that's the ILS localizer runway 23. The question is, where, and remember, you always got to read the question. Where is the final approach fix for ILS 23 at Greensboro? So before we go into that, let's kind of talk about the final approach fix. And in reality, what we're really talking about, because there's an ILS 23, is the PFAF. Well, who the heck talks about the PFAF? That's the Precision Final Approach Fix. And we're going to talk about that here. So basically, this is the final approach fix, right? This is your final approach. It starts with the final approach segment, right? And on the government charts, it's really interesting because there's a Maltese cross for the non-precision. So that Maltese cross, and I'm going to show you that later, that Maltese cross is going to designate non-precision, but on a precision approach, it's a lightning bolt. It's a lightning bolt also on the Jeppesen charts. Again, I'm going to show you that in a little bit here. So that is designating the precision final approach fix. And the precision approach, right, starts right there at glide slope, glide path, intercept. So that is actually where your final approach fix is, right? Or say air traffic control gives you a lower than published intercept altitude. That's your precision final approach fix. Again, I'm reading this. I want you to just kind of think about that. So that where's your final approach fix? We're going to talk about that later on this ILS. So it kind of gives have some of these in mind. That glide slope intercept altitude, again, on the government charts is used a lightning bolt. You also will see that with a fan on the JEP charts. Again, I'm going to show you that in a minute here. So this intersection, right, of your actually glide slope is your final approach fix. It's actually the PFAF, the Precision Final Approach Fix. We don't actually say that often. We should, but we don't. I wish we did. But so it's the final approach fix. If there's a different altitude, say they direct you at a higher altitude or lower altitude, that is actually going to be your Precision Final Approach Fix. I'm going to give you an example to help out. But before we do look at that example, just as a reminder, all these different segments of the approach, and the best way to describe it, I think, is looking at a picture. It really helps, I think, for me, to look at your feeder mount, your initial approach fix, and that's your initial segment. It is from the initial approach fix to the intermediate fix. So see, if you look at the two different diagrams there, it really helps a lot. I mean, there's three here. There's a plan view, a profile, and a projected view, which is actually both. But if you're looking at the intermediate portion, it starts with the intermediate to the final approach fix, right? So that's your intermediate portion. Your final segment starts with that final approach fix and then goes to your runway to a missed approach, usually at the runway or at a designated point along that approach, depending on the type you're doing. We're just talking about ILS right now, but there's many different points along that, and those many different points are actually depicted on your chart. I'm going to show that here. And then the next thing you're going to do is after your missed approach, you're going to go back either to the en route phase or you're going to go back and redo the approach. So this is actually really cool. So if you get a chance, take a look at this. This is going to be in the Instrument Procedures Guide, and you can find that. It's an FAA book, and it's for free. So hopefully this has helped, just kind of reviewing. You have your feeder routes to your initial approach fix. That starts your initial approach segment, and then you get to your intermediate fix, that starts your intermediate segment. Your final approach fix starts your final segment. So your final, start your final. Your intermediate, start your intermediate. Your initial, start your initial. So let's go on to the actual question again. Where is the final approach fix for the ILS 23 left at Greensboro? And I'm going to let you look at this for a second, right? And a lot of people are going to say Brant intersection. And this is a tricky one, by the way. I love this one as an example. I used to use the one in Tampa, but they don't. It isn't depicted like this anymore. So if you notice here, I'm going to give you the answer, and then I'm going to go back and explain why. If you notice here, it's 2,900 feet, right? That's your final approach fix. If you were to fly this, go outbound, do your procedure turn, descend to 3,100 feet, do your procedure turn, inbound. On your way inbound, you go down to 2,900 feet. Then you intercept your glide slope at 2,900 feet. Boom. That's your final approach fix. And there it is. So this is on the JEPs. You're looking at the JEPs right now, right? The next one we're going to look at is, I am so sorry. I meant to say you're looking at the government charts. Sorry. Let me say that again. They're looking at the government chart, the government chart here. This is the lightning bolt. So that is your final approach fix. The next one we're going to look at is the actual Jeppesen chart. And so it's depicted very similarly, right? But instead of that lightning bolt, and the lightning bolt is actually depicted on some of the JEP charts that are actually designated by some airlines. They actually put the lightning bolt in. But it's depicted by that glide slope, which is that little fan marker, and the 2,900, that intercept there. So you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, it's 2,900 feet. I go outbound. Again, this is a JEP. You go outbound, descend to 3,100, inbound to 2,900, intercept the glide slope. That's my final approach fix. So my next question is an add-on question. What's that? What in the world is that? It says glide slope 2729. So you can answer it if you want in the chat, and I'll give you kudos if you can answer that. But technically speaking, this is your glide slope altitude at the outer marker, or the final approach fix, right? With it's defined there. This final approach fix here is Brant intersection. It's that Maltese cross is defining that final approach fix. It's telling you this. Why is that so important? When we're flying this ILS, we need to double check that our altitude is correct by using our altimeter setting, right? It has to be correct. But we want to double check that we're at the right altitude. So when we cross Brant, most airlines, just about anywhere, when you cross Brant, you say 2,729. Or you call out the actual altitude. So let's, for instance, we're flying along. We're at 2,900 feet, and we start going down the ILS. And when we get to Brant intersection, we say we're at 3,000 feet. Well, we know we've got a problem because we should be at 2,729 feet. That's how we determine if we have the proper altimeter setting, is by actually double checking that. And that's really important, especially on a non-precision approach, but it's also important on a precision approach, because you need to know if your altitude you're going to is the correct altitude. Because what are you using? You're using your altimeter when you're using an ILS. We're not talking about Category 2, Category 3, where you use a radar altimeter. You're using your altimeter. If your altimetry is wrong at that point, the next thing you need to do, if it doesn't say 2729, or within 100 feet or so, or whatever your op spec says, you need to query the controller and say, hey, listen, what's the current altimeter setting? They give you the current altimeter setting, and you can correct that. So that's why we're doing that. Almost every approach you do, you're going to say you're going to cross Brant at 2729. But our final approach fix is 2900. Hopefully that makes sense. So on our government charts, they're depicted similarly. Remember, there's the lightning bolt on the government chart, so 2,900. There's also the 2,729. That's showing you what your glide slope altitude will be at that outer marker, or the final approach fix for that non-precision approach, which is the Maltese cross. So again, that's what it looks like on the government. We'll go back. That's what the glide slope altitudes at the outer marker looks like on the Jeppesen. This is a really cool one.